It's Hollywood Balls at the Euros with me, Geordie Pete Redding, and of course the football app, the #1 football app in the world. Now listen, guys, I've got the doyen of world referees in the house tonight. So if any of you start asking for that code early, you're getting a red card. Good evening, wherever you are in the world. Nigeria, Cyprus, I could go through it. There's Japan, there's everywhere, George. It's absolutely incredible, the audiences that we're getting from our TFA community. But it's a massive, massive welcome back to one of my favorite guests, Keith Hackett, Hollywood Balls. You've been on, this is your hat trick now, by the way. Before we get on to officiating, just want to say how you are and what you think of the tournament so far from a spectator's perspective.
I've really enjoyed it. I think that the fact that it's travelling around Europe and putting pressures on players and referees in relation to different grounds, different stadiums, different sounds. I think the real thing, Pete, is we've just got a crowd back in. And what we've seen in Budapest is just absolutely incredible. We'd almost forgotten about the crowd and the influence that they can put on players and, of course, referees.
George, meet Keith. We're going to get on to some Spurs stuff because there's such a famous game that means a lot to both of you. But I'm going to ask him some pertinent questions, but just wanted to intro you guys first and foremost.
Hi, George.
Yeah, Keith, it's a pleasure. Seen you many a time, and it's just wonderful and weird meeting you in person, if you don't mind me saying.
Great. You haven't got a red card then, George.
No, I was going to say, can I say, oh, ref, come on. Can I say that?
Look, you pay the money, you're allowed to shout as far as spectators are concerned.
Keith, I'm going to get straight into it because the thing that I've noticed about these tournaments is that there's less controversy than there is in the Premier League. I've rarely seen VAR. Our friend. Can you, from a ref's perspective, can you tell us why you think that is?
I think the first thing is leadership. I think that in the Premier League, I think the referees lack leadership. The boss, who I've criticised on many occasions, is not giving the required direction or support or accountability. And I think, if referees have poor games, like players, they should be sitting on their hands and not given appointments. So it's become quite a bit of a club atmosphere, a bit like, we're all relaxed and we don't really put in the performances. I think what has been remarkable is, first of all, Roberto Rossetti, himself quite a good Italian referee, laid down some very strict rules what he wanted to see. He wanted to see the game's flow. He wanted VAR to only come in on clear and obvious errors. And of course, what UEFA have done is they've broadened the lines. They've taken the Dutch line. The Dutch last year decided to make those lines on offside broader. And so UEFA has done the same. And I think the great thing is that we're not seeing the nonsense that goes off in leading up to, is it offside, is it not offside, where we can all see it, and where we're getting toes off and toes not off. So I think I've been impressed with the speed of decisions generally, the accuracy, and of course sometimes I think we've posed, as we've probably all done, thinking, why isn't VAR intervened on one or two decisions? If you take the Wales-Denmark game, German referee Daniel Seibert, we had the substitute come on, Harry Wilson, and a bit of youthful enthusiasm. He lunges into the opponent. For me, hey, come on. We've seen referees really use a lot of common sense, not jump in with red and yellow cards, which is refreshing, but it suddenly produced a red card. And I have to say, I share the views of other referees that have commented on this, and that is, I think he'd have got away with a yellow card rather than a red. 90 minutes, 90th minute, Was it necessary? No. Did it fulfill serious foul play? I don't think it was excessive force, and I didn't see any brutality in that challenge. I just saw youthful enthusiasm. So for me, give a bit, take a bit, but he didn't. He sent Wilson off.
Yeah, look, by and large, I agree with the comments completely, Keith. That Welsh decision against the Welsh lad, just very simply, was a terrible decision. Yesterday, I saw an exact replica in the game whereby there was a deliberate foul. It wasn't even given as a yellow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, a deliberate foul does not equate to a red card. A deliberate dangerous foul equates to a red card. It was just a very poor decision, you know.
I think it's interesting because obviously in the rounds leading up to the final 16, I think the players have responded really well. One of the outstanding things that I've really enjoyed is that we've seen players in the Premier League falling over like a pack of cards, and almost if the wind changes direction, and it's become a bit of a nonsense. And I think that seeing even our two English referees that are at this tournament, Anthony Taylor, who's having a terrific tournament, and Michael Oliver, have both carried out UEFA instructions, and that is just ignore them. If they're falling over and they're looking at you, just ignore them, get on with the game. Now, that's refreshing, and I think that's what fans want to see. Less of the referee, more of the players, and I think that's what we're getting in UEFA generally. I think in this tournament, we're seeing some really class players, and as we get, now we're into the knockout stage, we see a bit of the venom coming in. We see a bit of the hate coming in, and a few tasty challenges that will come in for sure, because they know a loss is going to mean the bus home or the plane home.
Yeah, well said, well said.
I've got to say as well, Keith, for you, it's double. We watch it as a fan, and we shout because we're all referees, but you're actually a referee and a fan. So it's got to be double pressure for you watching the games, thinking they're not playing well, but the ref's not doing well. And what I've noticed on your social media, and it's fantastic, by the way, you give credit where credit's due when there's a great refereeing performance, and I think that's outstanding.
Yeah, I think that if we look at a few of the referees in this tournament, they're experienced. They've done lots of big games. You know, the two Dutch referees have done really well. You know, they look relaxed. They're very professional. What I think I've seen, and the comparison here is that I believe that we were getting into, in England, into a malaise of poor refereeing. And I thought the standard, you know, for me, the standard has dipped. In the last 2 or 3 years, it's really gone down. And I'm getting really concerned. What's really pleasing is that with direction and with a knowledge of accountability, Michael Oliver and Anthony Taylor's had 3 games in this tournament, which says UEFA and Roberto Rossetti is really happy with his performances. And I too think, now if you're coming back to England, which you are, and the season starts, I want to see from these 2 referees the same level of movement on the pitch, accuracy in decision-making, managing the players effectively, not responding too much to the ducking and diving, and not jumping in with cards. Because, you know, Anthony Taylor, as an example last season, was a referee who allowed the game to flow in the first 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden, like confetti, the cards started coming out.
Yep.
And like we're going slow down. So refereeing is more about managing yourself and the players, and managing yourself is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing referees looking really relaxed. I'm not in conflict with you. They're not trying to steal the limelight. They're letting the players express themselves. And the players, to great credit to them, are responding generally in a positive fashion.
Can I ask you then, Keith, why does that not happen in the Premier League?
Well, I mean, putting it bluntly, I think the guy who's running the PGMOL whose budget when I left was 5 million, is now 22 million pounds into refereeing at the professional level in England. So we're talking about 60 referees and probably 300 or 400 assistant referees. What has happened in England is we did away with, he offloaded a number of really good coaches, people, experienced referees, Roger Dilks, Paul Durkin, Tom Bune. These were really experienced guys who saw it and were able to say categorically to that referee, not happy with your performance, or even at half time go in and say, look, I'm giving you a shake. You need to get a bit better. You need to improve. And I think that Mike Riley did away with the assessors, did away with coaches. He's got one or two coaches now that nowhere near the quality of what we used to have. As a sort of response to that, his reliance became on a limited number of referees. So you had somebody like Anthony Taylor refereeing in Manchester on a Friday night and Saturday afternoon in the VAR room for a 12 o'clock kickoff at Stockley Park. They're either referees, they're assistant referees, or they are VAR operators. FIFA is saying, okay, one or two of them are Premier League referees, but they're saying, in this tournament, you're a VAR. And I want that in the Premier League. I want a small panel of VAR operators who understand the technology, who do it without looking, and come up with the advice to the referee. You need to have a look at this, mate. That's offside or it's not offside. And, we just need to improve.
It's fascinating, George, isn't it? To hear this.
I mean, some of the things that Keith referred to into this tournament's VAR and the broader lines and what have you, and the accountability, that's what every English Premier League fan cries out for. I mean, exactly. God forbid, it's common sense, right? And
it is.
That's what drives fans, pundits, journalists crazy, and managers crazy, right? It's the lack of consistency. It's almost as if the relationship between referee and the VAR operators are second guessing each other as opposed to being a unit, right? And you're seeing that insecurity in the performance of the referee. A bad referee can't become a good referee overnight, and vice versa. The two British referees, to your point, at the Euros are doing great. Arguably, they're doing far better than they were in the Premier League last season. Why is that? Why is that? I think it's because the clarity of vision with the VAR operator, it's the clarity of the broadening the lines. And maybe we're just imagining this, but they look more confident, they look more comfortable, they don't look like they're second guessing themselves, right?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. And your observations, I see exactly the same. With my experience as a referee, I'm saying, the relationship between VAR and referee is wrong. I mean, you may have a young new referee onto the list, and all of a sudden his VAR operator is, say, Anthony Taylor, a really experienced referee. And what Anthony's saying is, I'll take it. And so what we've seen, in my opinion, is lazy referee. I liken it to a tightrope walker. If he's got no safety net, his next step on that tightrope is going to be focused, concentrated, and he's going to be right. Because if he's not, he's off the rope and he's injured. But what we've done is we've introduced the safety net. And so the tightrope walker gets a bit lazy. It doesn't matter if he falls off, he's going to fall into the net. And what we've got and what we've seen is some really good referees. And I underpin your point very clearly, and that is they've taken the lazy option. They've not given the decision. They've said, right, I'll wait and see. The VAR will come in. And then when the VAR comes in, they've not said to the VAR, you've got that one wrong, mate. I disagree with you. I'm sticking with what I've seen. They're actually capitulating. And what we've seen in England is VAR actually refereeing the matches rather than the referee. And what we're seeing in Europe is we're seeing that first line. And that line is Mr., if you like, Rossetti saying to the VAR operators, 22 who are operating in Neon, who are accountable, make no mistake, if they don't do it right, they're on the next plane home. So as a consequence, they can have a discussion. They can have this continuing debate. Did we get this right? And he starts off by saying the criteria for VAR is that you only intervene when it is clear and obvious. And what we're seeing in the Premier League is the VAR wanting to say, I'm here, look at me, I want to referee the match.
Yeah.
That's not happening in UEFA.
Well said.
Absolutely fascinating. Listen, just for all the fans, I've got to give a quick shout out because there's loads of people. Hi, everyone from Russia. We've also got Eunice is in the house as well. Lovely message from Austin Joel. Hi, George, Geordie, and Keith. Sending my regards from the United States. Great to have you all on board. For all the listeners, Keith, I think it's worth saying you are, and I know you're a very, very humble man, but probably the greatest referee, in my opinion, and in many people's opinion. You started out as a linesman, didn't you?
I did. I mean, that's how we progressed. We refereed. I refereed for 12 years at grassroots level, so it was someone's son or daughter that was playing, and so they let you know. They stand on that. They get on that line, and if you got it wrong, they tell you. And I can remember on one occasion. Believe it or not, I'd refereed an international game, and I was walking in the park exercising when a game hadn't got a referee. So I turned up, I got my tracksuit on, I borrowed a whistle, and I started to ref this match. And then within 10 minutes, these were like 8, 9 years old that were playing. And all of a sudden, I'm confronted by this woman who's on the pitch, giving me what for. And she's saying, "You're a boy." And I'm going, I said, "I'm refereeing a football match." Of course, other people who around the pitch who recognised who I was were falling over with laughter. But you grounding, and then of course the promotion is I went Northern Premier League linesman first as then, and you were running the line to some guys who were learning the craft as well, and then eventually on the Football League. So I had 2 or 3 years on the Football League as a linesman before becoming a referee. And I was on the Football League and the Premier League when it was formed for a couple of years. But I refereed at that level for 23 years. So it was an interesting time because, when I look across the range of players that I had to manage, George Best, Maradona, Platini, Glenn Hoddle, Kenny Dalglish,
wow,
Peter Reid. These were players who I was a spectator. I was the referee. I got a whistle, but I got the best seat in the house. And when I took the cup final, and remember, you only get the cup final once. I ran the line on the Man United Arsenal game in '79, but in '81, everybody was amazed that as a young guy, I was appointed to this game. And of course, the first game was 1-1. Ricky Villa substituted, walking around the pitch, dejected. And I felt for him. I felt, this is not the right thing. You don't want that to happen to a player. But then in the second game, best seat in the house, I'm chasing him as he rounds 3 or 4 players and scores probably the best goal that's ever been scored at Wembley. And certainly the best goal in the cup final. And those are the things people say, why do you take up refereeing? Because I'm a frustrated fan. I wasn't good enough to be a player, but I shared the same pitch as a lot of players. And I'll tell you, I had a philosophy. I wanted to keep them on. So if players wanted to have a go at me, I listened, but it went over my head. I didn't overreact. And I'm seeing referees doing that in this tournament. I'm seeing them actually remaining calm, letting some of the players get rid of the frustration, not overreacting. And that's where we want refereeing to be. We want it to be part of the game, but the game is about players and not referees.
Well said. The game we often refer to as the beautiful game. For the game to be a beautiful game, the referee almost needs to be silent, right, as it were. I mean, if it needs to, it needs to. But you don't want referees wanting to be part of the visible game, right?
Correct.
And thank
there
you.
Are a couple.
I will. Yeah, there are. There's no doubt. And let's not go down that route. Right? But but one thing fans of the Premier League want to understand is why doesn't the term accountability apply to English Premier League refs? I think it would help them, right? It's almost like a closed shop. Right?
Well, let me tell you and this is, I think anybody who listens to and reads what I write, it's a frustration, because when I was boss of the PGMOL, I took it over and said, right, I'm going to communicate with managers. Managers can ring me on a Monday. I will listen to what they have to say. If I don't, if you like, convince them that what we'd done was right, I would visit them. So yeah, I went to Carrington, I went to Chorley, I Wenger at Radley, I saw Benitez at Liverpool. I met these people face to face. And the reality is this, like players, some players who are championship players, they get promoted to the Premier League and they can't make that step up. They're not good enough for that level. That's exactly the same with referee. So when I took over, I said referees would be accountable. And so there were referees, there was a guy called Matt Messias who was an international referee who I fired. There were people like Andy Durst, who was a competent championship referee, but on the Premier League, if you remember, he had that clash with Roy Keane in his face. Yep. He never recovered. I dropped him down into the Football League, and I dropped others. And at the same time, I would ring them up and say, next weekend, you're sitting on your hands. Go and walk the dog or take the wife out or the girlfriend. You're not refereeing on this league until I see something better. And on a Monday morning, if need be, I'd chat to Sky. It was to give a fan's view. I can remember sitting in a room at Anfield with about 50, 60 Liverpool ardent supporters having a chat. And at the end of the night, somebody stood up and said, Keith, you're a brave man to have come here to listen to what we have to say, but we're really delighted you did.
Yeah.
Maybe we've learned a bit. And I've just done a paper for the government with a number of people involving Brian Deane and other footballers actually saying we need to change the regulations in football, because in the English Premier League and probably around the world, fans need to be inclusive in the game. They need to be involved in what's going off. And part of that is it's very easy for the PGMOL to come out and say, this referee got it right, this was a red card, or to come out, as I'm saying, that this referee, this German referee, who sent the Welsh referee off, the Welsh player, Harry Wilson, off, it wasn't red. And somebody needs to tell him that. And somebody needs to say publicly, look, it is, in this case, a matter of opinion, but in our opinion, this is how the law should be applied, to help other referees. If we don't sort out what the current referees are doing, how can we employ and have better referees in the future?
I don't know. And that's why I always think you should be involved. George, I'm going to come to you because we're going to get into Euros, because since we've last met, names are flying out, aren't they? Left, right, and centre. We've lost Wales,
yes,
we've lost Austria, we've lost Holland, we've lost Portugal. Wow.
Can I just say just one thing?
Of course.
Keith, is there any prospect of you getting back involved in a leadership position?
Exactly.
I mean, that's what we need, right? It's not rocket science, right? It feels like there's ego in the way of these guys, of the echelons that are managing this. Park the ego, do what's right for the game. Right?
I think in all honesty, things in England will not change until Mike Riley is moved on. I think that It's as simple as that. I think the philosophy that he operates is one of a power base, and I think that if you say, do I get involved? I mean, I get involved in other countries because they're quite prepared to listen, and I'm quite prepared to help. I mean, the reality is that I think football at times, those that run football at the top level, the administrators, never kicked a ball, never refereed. I don't have a worry with that, but they don't like someone like Keith Hackett, a little bit like Jeff Boycott. They don't like Jeff Boycott in cricket at the administration level, and that's where we're at. So, you know,
I'm sorry, Pete. Let's move on. It's just that we have a British gem in Mr. Keith Hackett,
exactly,
and the authorities refuse to use him.
It's
only in the United Kingdom can that happen. Let's move on.
And we will move on, but it is the words waste and embarrassment spring to mind. So, as I was saying, George, flying out, aren't they? It is the knockout stages, but were you surprised? I was surprised by Holland. Belgium, I would say, yeah, that was fine. I knew that they would probably have a close game against Portugal. Austria out as well.
So here's the surprising thing. The teams that have won have played well. The teams that have lost have played almost generally equally as well. Austria was incredibly unlucky against Italy. Incredibly unlucky. The Dutch were outplayed. They were naive. They deserved to lose. It's been fascinating. The team of the tournament for me, as you know, has been Italy. And I thought generally they were going to lose. I thought Austria deserved to beat them even. I go that far. It's just because of that dynamic of the changes and other teams winning that you'd expect not to win, perhaps. It's been a fabulous tournament. Tournament. My predictions have been incredibly dreadful.
They're not. Listen, they're the same as mine. You and I, we know we're bang average, and we get reminded of that from a certain Kevin Campbell. Keith, I'm going to ask you to take your cards out your pocket, but as a fan, who's been standout for you team wise?
I think that first game that Italy played was incredible. I mean, you know, I had the pleasure of refereeing the opening game in the '88 Euros, West Germany, Italy.
Was Italy? It was Italy, wasn't it? 1-1.
Yeah, and they, you know, after about 10 minutes, they shut up shop. But that's how the Italians used to play. Despite the fact that they had some fantastic players, Paolo Rossi to name, and others to name. And so I've been really refreshed by the positive manner in which the teams, and a lot of teams have come out and really played extremely well. You know, in this knockout stage, I think I've just got to make an observation, and that is referees probably need to just tighten a bit, because I was really saddened to see De Bruyne almost getting kicked out of the tournament, and the referee not responding and not acknowledging that, hey, just a minute, tactically they were after him. And I think that's again part of the responsibility of the referee to protect the players and just deal with it accordingly. The quiet word is sufficient. I can see what you're doing, stop it, and all that goes. So for me, Italy have been really remarkable. I think England have just we've just got to start playing. We've just got to attack. Play the style that we see in the Premier League, and it's a bit gung-ho. That will get the fans on side rather than this defensive, pass it back. How many times have we got to pass it back?
I've got a question for you, Keith. And it's put your ref's hat on. Everyone's crying out for Jack Grealish to play, and certain pundits say that he obviously is the most fouled player in the Premier League. From a referee's perspective, there's a young pundit, up and coming pundit, who's great, Mika Richards, who says that he invites that to win it. Graham Souness disagrees. Where do you stand in that?
I think that there's no doubts in my mind that he does. He's a player who holds up the ball. As a result of that, this is a little bit like Kevin Davies at Bolton Wanderers some years ago. Less skill than Grealish, but he was also a player that held up the ball and invited the challenge. And when that challenge comes in, he's going to get the foul. Grealish adds to that problem. Like many players, I'm not just out, sort of saying he's the only one. He does go over a bit easy, doesn't he? And you suddenly think to the defender, well, if you're going to do it properly and make certain he's got to be attended to, rather than have the frustration of him falling over. I think I go with a young pundit rather than with Graham. Graham would be happy to say, I'll kick anybody out of sight. But at the same time, I do like what he's got to say. I think Graham Souness is an excellent pundit, and I think he opens all our eyes at times. But on this one, I think Jack Grealish is going to be interesting. If he goes to Manchester United, he'll be a remarkable addition to that team, and they will benefit by having him. But I'd have him in the team. But then, let me tell you, as a referee, I'd run alongside him and I'd say, that's a 9.9. I'm looking for the next dive, and he wouldn't get it. He wouldn't get it, even though he's fouled. And I'd say, you might think it's a foul, I don't. And I would try to get a level as to get some order in it. But I'd also say to the captain, why don't you have a quiet word with him? Because he's falling over, and I'm not going to fall for it. I'm going to I want you to play, and I want him to play. Have a quiet word. So
Fascinating, George, isn't it?
Yeah, I think those are what referees can do to help prevent. And I'll tell you what, I have no doubts that if somebody says to Grealish, don't go down as often, retain the ball and move away from that player coming in, he'll be a better player.
Yeah. I would, to your point, I would build the English team around Grealish, and he definitely needs coaching on the diving part, no doubt. But he is an incredible talent, and I think he's almost as good as the modern day Gascoigne. He's that good, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a great statement, because
I believe that he has that potential.
I'm just looking for the mute button, George. Just looking for the mute button.
Well, you know how much I love Gaza, Pete, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I refereed Gaza. I'll tell you a story. I was to do a testimonial game at Doncaster, and they were due to play Everton, but Everton couldn't turn up for the game, and Barnsley appeared. But about 5 minutes before kickoff, 7:25, there's a knock on my door, and Gascoigne walks in. And he says, can I play, ref? And I've gone, he's got a pair of boots. And I then call in Billy Bremner, who was manager of Barnsley, and said, look, Gascoigne wants to play. He's moving from the northeast. He was playing for Spurs. I said, I don't know if he's got permission to play this game, but his mate, Gascoigne's mate, was the goalkeeper. So he played, and he was just simply outstanding. But in this game, I didn't give a foul. He was fouled. I didn't give it, and I played an advantage, and he ran the ball out. So it was a poor decision from me to play that advantage. So he told me what for, and I said to him, look, and I tell you, I handed him my red card, and I said, look, next time you're unhappy with my decision, just show that. And he tucked it down his shorts, and about 10 minutes later, I'm blown for what is a very clear foul, and he's run at me, and he's done the usual Gascoigne red card. Of course, when he moved from Spurs up to Scotland, you remember he gave the referee a yellow card, handed it back, and he got disciplined for that. The media were onto me, and fortunately, it didn't convey that particular story of Gascoigne. Gascoigne, the difference between Gascoigne and Grealish was Gascoigne could be fouled and would be fouled, but retain his feet. He just had this remarkable strength and ability to take the pain of a really bad challenge but still come away with the ball smiling. And you suddenly go, he was special. I've got to admit, he was a difficult character to referee, but he was a special player, no question.
I would fancy refereeing him, Keith. Listen, we've had an amazing response, George, to our new Stato. He's brilliant, isn't he? All the way from Australia. He tells us about the Euros and what's going on. He's got stats every day. He's got one for us today, so let's have a listen.
Hello, it's Geordie Stato Dave Huggan here from Australia. I'm watching the Euros, and for me that's a 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. kickoff at the moment, so I'm not getting much sleep, but I am enjoying the games. Now, what have we got up today? Well, we've got Croatia versus Spain. 2012 Euros, Spain beat Croatia on the way to getting the final and winning that tournament. 2016, Croatia beat Spain in the Euros, so it's 1-1 in this fixture. They're meeting again. I'm going to go for a Spain win 2-1. Now, the other game is France versus Switzerland. They also played in 2016 at the Euros, and it was a boring 0-0 draw, so we'll be hoping for something better than that. I'm going to go for France with that one, and that's good news for Switzerland and Croatia fans, because I've got them all wrong so far in the round of 16. And a little fact for you for Switzerland. Well, in 2006, they went home from the World Cup without letting a single goal in. The first team for that to happen. So, interesting stat, that. Anyway, enjoy the games, and I'm going to hand back to Pete.
George, he's absolutely incredible, isn't he?
I didn't know Switzerland got knocked out of the World Cup without conceding a goal. Wow.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Listen, I could stay on for another 3 hours with Keith because of the stories. But what we do is, when there's a player or a manager, we ask about the hardest players that you faced or the toughest managers that you've encountered. But because Keith's a ref, I'm going to have to ask you, Keith. And because you've had such an amazing career, who's the toughest player? When you see that you've got a game or a team and you go, I know he's going to be my ear all game. Who was it?
I think there were several. Jerry Gow stands out. Jerry Gow was a player who I think was wound up by his manager and was prepared to go out and do the damage. And of course, in that replayed game of the FA Cup final, it clearly was out to get our dealers. And he got a fairly early yellow card from me to try and quieten things down. So he comes to mind. Brian Horton was a guy who wanted to talk. No, he was less of a clogger, but he was more a player that just got at you. He was rattling throughout the game. So there were a number of players. I mean, you talk about Wimbledon and Laurie Sanchez, where everybody talks about Dennis Wise and Vinnie Jones. Sanchez was the one that you needed another eye in the back of your head, because he was clever enough to stick one in when no one was looking, really to set off the player and get a reaction. So we had lots of players of that type. I mean, I ran the line when Norman Hunter played, but at Leeds, it was, I can remember Jack Taylor running them the line and saying, look, I just want you to keep an eye on Johnny Giles, not on Norman Hunter. Don't get fooled, because Johnny Giles is the one that'll stick it in and prepared to go over the top. So sometimes the names give them the reputation, but often it's players who you come across on the day.
You were the ref, Keith, of that famous Arsenal Man United falling out, weren't you?
Oh, I was. And, today I still smile about that. I mean, somebody said to me, why didn't you send anybody off? Because it was a 21-man brawl. It lasted a few seconds, but it was long enough. And I answered the FA when they asked me, why didn't I send someone off? And I said, well, which of the 21 do you want me to send off? And the guy looked at me and I said, well, if I'm going to be fair to send somebody off, then it's 21 or none. And now you're at this committee meeting in the FA – and you've got to decide the outcome. And of course, I talk about now the modern referees having to prepare, know your players, know the tactics and all that goes. Maybe we were a little bit naive. I didn't know that Irwin and the other Arsenal player had a bit of leftovers from a previous match. And you know, I looked at that video, they replayed it and said, what would you have done now? And I said, well, I've got two players clearly in mind that I would have dismissed. The outcome of that was deduction of points, and it resolved the issue. They've never done that since, and they didn't. That was the first time, and it's the only time.
Who kicked it off, Keith?
Well, I think it was Brian McClare. If you look at it, he come round and sneakily, whilst the player was on the deck, had a bit of a kick at him. It was a red card offence. Make no mistake, he got away with it, and I mean, I just piled in. I mean, I had this philosophy: if I needed to get in and pile and move them out. I mean, I see referees now when they have a mass confrontation, they stand there, let them do the business, and then eventually the players stop it and then they get involved. For me, I want to try and prevent the escalation. So there's a lot to learn, and we now have a criteria. The referees operate a criteria on mass confrontation. You know, the minimum is 2 yellow cards, but if you're going to do reds, then you do the away team red first, the home team red if you've got a couple. Ask the assistants, are there any more reds? And if there are, then you send a third. And perhaps the 1996 Carling Cup final, which Howard Webb refereed, in the 90th minute, it all blew up. And the result was 3 yellow cards, and Mourinho and Wenger both fined for that outcome in the last 6 minutes. And it was actually textbook how to deal with a mass confrontation.
George, I could stay on till midnight talking to Keith about all the stories of the players. He's got a brilliant one, because we'll get him back on, because he's got we're 7:43 here. I've got to put the code up, the last code for all the guys and the fans who've really enjoyed it. Keith, it's been an absolute pleasure. Right. But we're going to invite you back on, because I want that Newcastle Sunderland story again, because George, Keith was a ref at the Newcastle Sunderland derby, and it's a fantastic story. But we'll save that for Keith Hackett part 2. Ladies and gents, here is your last code of the day. It's YG, so you've got all your codes. It's been a fascinating show, George, hasn't it?
Fantastic, Keith. You've been wonderful. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to chatting again.
Thank you.
Ladies and gents of Hollywood Balls, the one and only Keith Hackett. No cards handed out. George and I get away for another 90 minutes tomorrow, and we'll see you then. Take care.
Bye.